Good morning, guys.
Good morning, everyone. There's no way to sugarcoat the situation we find ourselves in today. What we face is not a routine policy discussion. It is a mandatory call to action that will define the future of high school athletics in Ohio. As you all know, a lawsuit has been filed against the OHSAA directly challenging our NIL rules. A lawsuit has triggered an emergency situation, and your collective vote is the only firewall we have left. The reality is a tough one to swallow. If our member schools do not pass this proposed language now, the decision will be made for us. A judge could strip the OHSAA of its ability to enforce any NIL rules, creating an immediate and chaotic environment for our schools, coaches, and athletes across the state. So let's be clear. The choice is not between NIL or no NIL. The choice is between the OHSAA member schools maintaining structure, guardrails, and oversight, or losing all control of forces outside of our organization. NIL is coming. What's at stake today is who governs it. Because of the short period of time which we have to work, we brought in Influential Athlete as an official NIL education partner. They are here because this moment demands clarity, preparation, and immediate action. Influential Athlete's role is twofold. First, immediate clarity and education. They will walk you through exactly what the proposed NIL language says, what it doesn't say, and what it truly means to your schools. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and in today's session, we'll give you a crystal clear understanding before you cast your vote. Second, providing an option to minimize administrative burden. If the vote passes, we know your next concern will be, how do we manage this? Though we believe the current language minimizes your burden, we also recognize that some schools may want to take a more active role in educating your students and families. That is why we entered into an in-kind partnership with Influential Athlete. To be clear, the OHSAA is receiving no money from them, and they are receiving no money from us. But we know that they have the resources and experience to provide your athletic directors and principals with the tools to minimize any administrative workload this new landscape may create if you choose to use their services. The stakes today could not be higher. This is our opportunity to lead, to protect the integrity of high school athletics in Ohio, and to keep the decision-making in our hands. I urge you to listen closely to the team from Influential Athlete, Stephanie and Joe Grady. They will give you an understanding and the confidence you need to make the best decision for your schools, athletes, and the future of the OHSAA. Let's get started.
All right, Doug, I very much appreciate that. Hi, everyone. We're going to be sharing our screen here in a moment as we move forward with this presentation. First and foremost, I just want to thank all of you for being here today. We really appreciate everyone taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this presentation this morning. As I'm sure everyone is aware, and of course, as Doug just touched upon, today we're here to talk about name, image, and likeness and the role that it will play and is already playing in high school athletics in the state of Ohio. But before we get into the real content of our what we're going to be talking about today, the core of our content, I want to take a second to just more or less introduce ourselves so that you have a better understanding of, number one, who we are, number two, what we do, and number three, really why you should listen to us. So first and foremost, my husband Joe and I, we co-founded this company. Joe spent the first 20 years of his professional career in high school education and administration. He's originally from the New York area, where he was a physical education teacher and coached multiple different high school sports during his time there as a teacher. We moved to Wisconsin just about 10 years ago, and we've spent almost a decade there. Joe spent almost a decade as an athletic director in southeastern Wisconsin, right near the Milwaukee area. So he really comes with a unique perspective on athletic administration and how NIL is really going to impact all of you as athletic directors and other administrators who are on the call, because he has been one. So he understands the needs that you all have. I am the CEO of our company. I co-founded this company with my husband, Joe, 3 years ago. Prior to launching Influential Athlete, though, just a little bit of background about me, I was a television news anchor for 17 plus years, working for all the major news networks, ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC. Before TV, I was an internationally competitive figure skater. So I understand what goes into being an elite athlete, the time, the dedication, the commitment, and really the sacrifice. we decided to launch our company to help student athletes maximize the opportunities NIL now presents for them by learning the personal and professional skill sets necessary to be a successful player in the NIL landscape. We help steer them on the right path so that they navigate this new world safely and with the highest integrity, all while gaining invaluable experience that will help set them up for success after their athletic careers come to an end. And this is really part of the reason why OHSAA wanted to partner with our company specifically. Joe and I have a really unique perspective when it comes to our experience and skill sets to help schools and athletes navigate this new NIL world the right way. We also help to educate all the member schools in Wisconsin when the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association, or the WIAA, proposed their own NIL language last spring, because they too were at a crossroads of lawmakers getting involved and the threat of lawsuits being filed. So first, like I mentioned, Joe has nearly 20 years professional experience in high school athletics, giving us really that distinct vantage point when it comes to supporting schools like yours and administrators like you. We also have experience doing just this, educating administrators like you on this new frontier involving NIL and what it actually means for student athletes and schools like yours. Second, we're experts in the name, image, and likeness space, having spent 3 years building this company from the ground up. NIL is a really fast-changing environment because a lot of the kinks and the rules are still being worked out because it is so brand new. There are countless lawsuits across the country that will likely shape the NIL landscape for years to come. And unless you're up to speed on all of it, it is easy to fall behind. And third, we are in full support of whole student education, taking an education-based approach to the personal and professional opportunities NIL allows for student athletes. I also have a very unique perspective when it comes to how to navigate having a personal brand publicly and what that entails, because I've lived it for nearly 20 years, being a public figure in various markets across the country. For your student athletes, name, image, and likeness is part of the conversation, whether you like it or not. And therefore, they need the proper education when it comes to this new landscape so they know what to do, what not to do, and how to succeed if they want to take advantage of it. NIL is not about just making a quick buck. It's not a money grab. It can be, and there are certainly bad actors out there, just like in any industry, that come looking for their piece. But that is why education in this area is so important. So we have several goals for you today for this meeting, and I think it's important for you to really understand what they are so that you know what to expect over the next 50 minutes or so. We have 4 key goals here for you today. The first is, number 1, to review and clarify the OHSAA's proposed NIL language that will be voted on by your school in 2 weeks from now. The second goal we have for today is really to challenge the misconception that passing NIL will create more administrative burden for athletic directors and other administrators at your school. Third, we want to highlight the benefits NIL can offer to your student athletes when it comes to their development. And lastly, we want to make clear the serious repercussions for student athletes and schools if NIL is not passed by you, the OHSAA membership, in the upcoming emergency vote. So let's get into the core of our content today. And we are going to start with what is actually being proposed. What you see here on your screen is exactly what you're going to see when you go to cast your vote yes or no to change eligibility language when it comes to name, image, and likeness the week of November 17th. Now, I know you can't read it, okay, because of the size, but I'm going to go through step by step, highlighting the areas and zooming in as we go through, because I want you to be familiar with all of this and have a crystal clear understanding of what each and every line actually means. Not what you think it means, but what it actually means. All of this falls under bylaw 4. Student eligibility, and it's being inserted directly after section 10, amateur. So let's get started here, and we're going to highlight as we go through. The updated language, it starts here, section 11, and it's titled Personal Branding Rights / Name, Image, and Likeness. So let's zoom in to this top section right here. The first header part of this reads, pursuant to bylaw 4-10-1, which is the amateur section I just mentioned, a student may not participate in an interscholastic sport unless the student is an amateur. Pay for play, receiving payment simply for being a student athlete, entering agreement/contract with a professional sports team, and improper recruiting inducements remain prohibited. So this part is more or less setting the stage for everything else to come in this section. Let's go back out to the main document here and keep moving down, okay? This first subsection of this section 11 is a 4-11-1. As we zoom on in, this top part reads, for purposes of this bylaw, name, image, and likeness, NIL, personal branding rights, shall mean the use of self-publicity due to public recognition, athletic fame, and/or the notoriety of a student may attain to receive a benefit through appearances, licensing, social media endorsements, and/or the use of branding. This is simply defining what the terms name, image, and likeness and personal branding rights mean in accordance with the rest of this document. Again, setting the stage. Let's go back out to the main document here. Let's move on down, and you can see there are 2 notes that are added. So let's zoom into them one by one. The first note says this bylaw has no connection to bylaw 5, which permits a student to accept awards, gifts, and prizes resulting from their participation/finish in athletic competitions. The requirements outlined within bylaw 4-11 are solely related to a student athlete's promotional and marketing efforts based on their public recognition, athletic fame, or notoriety. It's simply making a distinction between the language in this bylaw 4-11 and the next bylaw 5 that deals with awards. Moving to note 2, this defines what a collective is. It reads, a collective is a third-party group typically formed by alumni and supporters that pools donations and fundraising to create and manage NIL/personal branding rights opportunities for student athletes. The collectives provide student athletes with sponsorships, endorsement deals, and other ways to monetize their NIL/personal branding rights, bridging the gap between athletes and the brands or businesses looking to leverage their popularity and control their earnings from their public persona. Collectives are strictly prohibited. Tells you what a collective is, but you can't have them when it comes to high school athletics in the state of Ohio. If you're paying attention to college athletics, you know that collectives have been formed at most of your major universities to help recruit, find, and facilitate NIL deals for some athletes. And I say some of them because most collectives focus on the 2 money-making sports being football and men's basketball. At the high school level in Ohio, though, what this note says is that collectives are strictly prohibited. So you don't have to worry about what's happening at the college level, happening at the high school level in your state with the way the language is written here. Let's go back out to the main document. So we have the entire top part that we've covered at this point. Now let's move down to section 4-11-2, which makes up really the biggest chunk of this language and is really the most important part in terms of what you need to know. So this top section right here reads, a student may enter into an agreement/arrangement whereby the student capitalizes on their name, image, and likeness/personal branding rights, provided the following criteria are met. So a student can do NIL, provided they abide by the following criteria. And there are 9 points that we're going to go over here. The first point is A. This says the student does not utilize the name, logos, mascots, trademarks, or other proprietary properties of the OHSAA or any OHSAA member school or school team while receiving the compensation and/or during any promotions, or imply that the OHSAA or the OHSAA member school or school team approves the NIL/personal branding activity. Whew, that's a mouthful. Okay. There needs to be a clear distinction between an athlete's NIL activity and their affiliation to their school and OHSAA. This keeps you guys and your schools out of the picture. The kids can do NIL, but you can't bring the school into that activity. You can't be wearing the hoodie or the sweatshirt or have a flag in the background when they're shooting some sort of social media campaign. It leaves you guys completely out of the picture. The kids can solely capitalize off of their own personal name, image, and likeness, not their affiliation to your school or OHSAA. Let's move on to B. B states the student does not engage in an NIL/personal branding rights agreement that is provided by an OHSAA member school or an agent of the school. And it gives a few examples here: booster club, foundation, collective, administrators, coaches, or other individuals. So as a school, as an employee of the school, you are not allowed to be involved in one of your students' NIL deals. That means it's not up to you to provide, manage, or facilitate deals for your athletes. You're not allowed to. This is very different than at the college level, where schools are many times directly involved in athletes' NIL deals. You don't have to worry about that because of how these rules are written. You're not allowed to be involved in them other than reporting violations to OHSAA if you're made aware of them, like you already do for all the other rules that exist. Moving on to C now. The student athlete does not engage in any name and image/personal branding activities during school hours, while traveling to or from any OHSAA event, or during school or team events, including practice, meeting, contest, tournament, or any similar event or facility the OHSAA deems inappropriate or distracting, defined henceforth as official team activities. Again, this keeps NIL stuff from creeping into your school activity so it doesn't become a distraction. An athlete can partake in NIL activities, but on their own time, not during school hours, not during any sort of athletic obligation that they might have. Moving on to point D, number 4. The student does not engage in an NIL/personal branding rights agreement that provides compensation based on specific athletic performance or achievement, example, point scores, etc. The deal can incentivize performance. The same thing exists at the college level. So an athlete can't enter a deal where a pizza shop says, hey, I'll give you free pizzas for a month, but only if you win on Friday. Can't be directly tied to athletic performance. Point E, the student does not engage in an NIL/personal branding rights agreement that is provided as an inducement to attend a particular school. These rules do not allow NIL to be used as a recruiting mechanism. So for example, if a school were to say, hey, Sally, if you come to our school, XYZ business said it will do an NIL deal with you, you can't do that. That's using NIL to recruit. We all know the rules surrounding recruiting, right? This specific point bars NIL from being used as a recruiting tool. You also can't use NIL deals as a way to get kids to stay at a particular school. Again, that clear distinction. Let's move on now to point F. The student does not display the sponsor's product or otherwise advertise for a sponsor during official team activities. So if one of your athletes, for example, has a deal with a smoothie shop or with a car wash, they aren't allowed to show up to practice wearing a hoodie with the business's logo splashed all over it, or have a smoothie sitting on the bench for everyone to see while they're playing a game or practicing. Again, that clear separation between the NIL deal, they're allowed to do it, but you have to keep the school and any school sanctioned activities out of it. All right, couple more here. Point G. The student is the only person who is impacted by the NIL/personal branding rights agreement, and this agreement shall never provide any money, merchandise, services of value, or any other benefits directly to the student's school and/or team. So what does this mean? Well, this means that the deal has to be with the student only and can't impact in any way, even if it is beneficial, the school or the team. I have an example of kind of what this might look like coming up in a few minutes here as we go through some real life scenarios. So I'll let this play out for you so you can kind of see how this one would play out in real life. 2 more points that we have to get through. Next up, we have H. The student does not engage in an NIL/personal branding rights agreement associated with gaming/gambling, alcoholic beverages, tobacco, cannabis, banned or illegal substances, adult entertainment products or services, firearms or other weapons, or any other product or service the OHSAA deems inappropriate or distracting. These are industries that you as a parent probably wouldn't want your kids promoting in the first place. So this prohibits them from doing that. And just so you know, a lot of universities have this very same rule in place as well. Lastly, we've made it to the end here. I. The student is responsible for determining what, if any, effect the NIL personal branding rights agreement may have on eligibility with the NCAA, NJCAA, and/or the NAIA. It's not up to you to police whether or not your student athletes are engaging in NIL deals that could potentially put their college eligibility at stake for one reason or another. Again, not your job. It's the student and their parents' responsibility to understand the rules that could impact them. This relieves you of that burden. So that makes up the criteria student athletes have to adhere to in order to enter into a valid NIL partnership under these proposed rules. Let's keep moving down the document here. Okay, we're getting kind of close to the end. This next part, 4-11-3, simply states a student engaged in an NIL/personal branding rights agreement shall disclose each agreement to OHSAA within 14 days after entering into said agreement. Students who fail to disclose their agreements or fail to disclose their agreements in a timely fashion shall be subject to a period of ineligibility up to 20% of the sports season in which they participate, and/or any other penalties as outlined in bylaw 11. It also has a note here that says details on how to disclose said agreement shall be posted on the OHSAA website. So what this means is that they don't have to disclose their deals to you as an individual school, adding more paperwork and oversight to your plate. OHSAA will handle this aspect for you. Okay. Pulling out to the whole document, moving on down, let's get to 4-11-4. This states a student engaged in an NIL personal branding rights agreement shall also comply with any other applicable OHSAA bylaws and regulations and any applicable policies of his or her school. This simply means that just because NIL capitalization is allowed by student athletes, they still have to abide by all the other rules OHSAA has in place, like the transfer rules, rules about awards, etc. Moving down now to 4-11-5. This states if a student transfers to a school and the transfer can be shown to be reasonably linked to a student's NIL or personal branding rights agreement, a rebuttal presumption shall exist that the student has been recruited, which is in violation of bylaw 4-9, which is the bylaw dealing with recruiting rules. The Executive Director's Office may suspend the privilege of participation in interscholastic athletics during the pendency of any alleged violation of this bylaw. This one's pretty straightforward. You can't use NIL to recruit students, and if you do, you'll get in trouble because of it. Now, we did receive a question about the wording, rebuttal presumption. For clarity, a rebuttal presumption presumes a fact to be true unless evidence is presented to disprove it. So it basically simplifies things by assuming a certain fact based on circumstantial evidence. Oh, it's amazing. This kid transferred schools and he also got this NIL deal with a business that was close to town where this new school is, right? That's circumstantial. But it allows for that to be challenged with new evidence, meaning the presumption can be rebutted or proven false if other evidence is presented that shows that that actually wasn't the case. So that's what that means, just for those of you who might be wondering what that wording actually means. Few more points here, 3 more points. 4-11-6. Member school administrators and coaches shall have an obligation to educate the school community that any attempt to facilitate an NIL or personal branding rights agreement to help secure the enrollment of a prospective student shall result in penalties as prescribed in bylaw 11, which is the penalty section, including a review of the school's membership status. You do have the responsibility of making sure your school community understands what's allowed and what's not allowed. That goes for your coaches and your families. And then the potential ramifications if a rule is violated. Again, this is hitting that recruiting off limits button really hard. You already have the responsibility to educate your school community on all the other OHSAA rules that exist. This new section 11 pertaining to NIL, it's just now part of the equation, or it will be if it's voted through. And we'll talk about at the end how we as a company can help you if you are looking for help in that area. This next part is more directed at your students and their families, but let's go through this quickly. It says student athletes and NIL personal branding rights deals, along with their parents or guardians, are encouraged to seek professional advice understand contracts thoroughly, and prioritize academic and athletic commitments to protect the student athlete's eligibility and long-term success. These activities should be regarded as a business, and participants should stay compliant with school and state regulations and focus on building a strong support system to avoid mismanagement of funds and protect future opportunities. We've all heard of the nightmare stories of kids signing their earnings away in perpetuity or splurging on the new car without understanding the tax ramifications. This simply encourages those who want to pursue NIL, the small population that will, to do so intelligently by seeking help from professionals so that they don't get into trouble one way or the other. And lastly, we've made it to the end. Congratulations. 4-11-8. This states that any violation of bylaw 4-11, everything that we just went over, shall be subject to penalties outlined in bylaw 11. And there is a note that you can see that reads, the executive director's office may suspend the privilege of participation in interscholastic athletics during the pendency of any alleged violation of this bylaw. The same thing that exists for all the other rules in the OHSAA's handbook. So those are the rules that you're going to be voting on. Everything we just went through is the exact language you will see or your principal will see when they go to cast their emergency vote the week of November 17th. So if these rules are put into place by this upcoming emergency membership vote, what happens if you are made aware of a violation? Remember, it's not up to the individual schools to be actively policing this. The disclosure of deals happens to OHSAA, but if you are made aware of a potential violation of these criteria, you want to make sure that, number one, you talk to the student, right? See what the deal is. And then report it to OHSAA if necessary, just like you already do for any other violation of the bylaws that you're made aware of. So I want to take a moment now and give you some real-world examples of how an NIL activity could potentially play out in real life based on these particular rules. So let's take Susie, the high school volleyball player. Okay, she plays high school volleyball for her high school team. She does a deal with a local pizza shop and wears her high school volleyball shirt in a picture that is used on a mailer sent out to residents in her community. Do you think that that would result in a violation or not a violation? That would be a violation. She can't do that. She can't wear any school or OHSAA affiliated logo or uniform in any of her NIL activities. She'd get in trouble for that. Now let's take the same Susie, the volleyball player. She does a deal with the local pizza shop. She's not wearing any school uniform or logo, but on the mailer, it says, Susie is ranked number 3 in Ohio for volleyball and loves Roma's Pizza. Can she do that? Violation or no violation? That's not a violation. She's in the clear here because it doesn't identify her school, district, or OHSAA, and that ranking of being the number 3 volleyball player in the state, that could be put out by anyone or any organization. So this would be valid. Let's now take Johnny, the quarterback. He strikes a deal with a local chiropractor who says he will give him free adjustments every time he scores 1 or more touchdowns during a game. Would that be a violation or not a violation? Well, that would be a violation, right? Because the deal is contingent on a certain athletic achievement, him scoring touchdowns. Now let's take the same Johnny, the quarterback, strikes a deal with the local chiropractor to get free adjustments during the football season if Johnny posts on his social media about his experience every time he comes into the office to get an adjustment done. Can he do that? Man bun and all. Yeah, he can. That would not be a violation because he's simply using his name, image, and likeness to promote the service of the chiropractor. That's completely fine. Let's talk now about Sarah. She plays on our high school basketball team. And she does a deal with her club team to make money being a guest coach and having her picture on the club's website and brochures. And she would get paid for that. Is she allowed to do that? Yes, she is. Absolutely. Now, what if part of Sarah's deal with her club team was that her club team would not only pay for Sarah being a guest coach and using her image on their website and flyers, but they would also provide new warm-ups for her high school basketball team? Would that be a violation? Yes, it would be, because Sarah is the only one who can be impacted by her deal. Remember, her school team can't also benefit from Sarah's deal. So the way this language is written, with the 9 guardrails in place that we went through, A through I, provides a really clear framework for NIL in Ohio for high schoolers that allows student athletes to benefit from their skills while also ensuring boundaries that protect both the educational and athletic integrity of schools. So now that we have really drilled into the OHSAA's language that will be voted on the week of November 17th, and hopefully given everyone on this call a much better understanding of all the different pieces here, I want to talk about the number one thing that we have heard from other ADs that we've spoken with when it comes to your concerns about NIL at the high school level. And this is really the increase in work for school administrators, particularly the AD. Now, yes, there is a role the school will play with student athletes being involved in NIL activities, but it is not as extensive as you likely think. And we're also here to help with that if you ever want our help. So let's start with this. Amateur status exists, right? We know that. You need to know the rules. You need to make sure your athletes and coaches are aware of those rules. And if you're made aware of a violation of those rules, then you have to report it, right? That's what exists right now, currently. All NIL is going to do is just more or less change up the way some of those rules are written. Your administrative responsibilities will just shift from less amateur status situations and be replaced with potential NIL violations if you're made aware of them. It's not the AD's or other administrators' responsibility to be proactively looping themselves into the monitoring of NIL activities. It's just when you become aware of a violation that you need to report it. And that's the same thing you're doing now already. It's also very important to point out that it's not your job to facilitate NIL activities. And actually, it is against the rules, like we just went through, for schools or school employees to facilitate deals for students. NIL endeavors are primarily the responsibility of student athletes and their families. So when it comes to your responsibility with NIL, the way this language is written, if it passes, there are 3 main things that you're going to have to do, okay? The first is that you're going to have to make your coaches, student athletes, and families aware of the rule changes once they are in place. The second, provide NIL resources and information for your student athletes so they know how to navigate this new space while remaining compliant and not at risk of an eligibility violation. And lastly, report violations to the OHSAA if you're made aware of them, something that you already do and already have an obligation to do. And here's the great thing is that through our partnership with the OHSAA, we are here to help with all of that. If you want our help, and it's completely up to the individual schools if you want our help on the back end of this whole thing. Now, I will say that if you have a specific scenario, after we just went through all the bylaws, that you're drumming up in your head and you have a question, like, well, what about this situation? And what about this particular thing? Write it down, number one, so you don't forget it, or you can simply put it into the chat. And I know that some of the OHSAA staff members are on this call and they're actively working to answer those questions as quickly as possible right back to you through that chat. We'll also take some time at the end to answer some of those questions live on here. So I wanted to make mention of that. So, we've really spent the first part of this meeting talking about the legal language and some of the misconceptions, as well as your role as an administrator when it comes to this potential new NIL landscape. Hopefully, you feel a little bit more comfortable with all of that and have had some of your concerns addressed as we've gone through line by line. My job is to make this as black and white as possible, as transparent as possible. I want you to feel comfortable with this. OHSAA wants you to feel comfortable with this. And we want you to understand it and know what it means, not what you think it might mean. Now, before I move into this next section, I do want to level set on something quickly. I want to have a little bit of a mind shift going from kind of the legal concerns to administrative perspective into something a little bit more personal now. I want to spend some time talking a bit about what I feel through my experience working with athletes in tons of institutions across the country, the most important part of NIL and what that is. And honestly, the reason why we created the company that we did in the first place. A lot of you on this call today, if not all of you, are parents. Joe and I, we're parents to 3 young kids, Jack, Harper, and Dominic, ages 11, 7, and 4. And just like everybody else, we of course want our children to grow up to be well-rounded, productive members of society, to be successful in their own right, and to do good things in this world. In order to be able to succeed in life, regardless of what our kids want to do in their futures, there are skills that they have to develop along the way. There's a reason we put our kids into sports. It teaches them things like teamwork, sportsmanship, discipline, competition. The list really goes on and on. Those are all crucial skills needed for every chapter of life. And so we want them to start learning them young. And sports are great at that. But as kids continue to grow and they get older, there are other skills that become necessary for them to learn when they're striving for really that next level of success in their lives. Things like how to manage their time, how to communicate effectively, how to speak to adults, shake hands, make eye contact, interview, pitch themselves, manage money and taxes, all of that. These are skills that all of us, most of us anyways, have learned, maybe some sooner than others, but you learn it by getting experience and exposure in the professional world. For most of us, though, it's taken us years of being out in the real world to really kind of get good at these things. NIL has created an opportunity for these kids to get the experience and the exposure to that next game of life, the professional game, much sooner, as long as it's approached the right way. It allows them to develop these skill sets at a much younger age than I ever did, and I'm sure many of you ever did. NIL is really like this carrot or this cool new thing kind of dangled in front of kids' faces that can drive them to want to seek out these soft skills, these professional skills sooner in life. And so I want you to kind of remember this as we continue on through the rest of this presentation so that you have that perspective in the back of your mind of what the benefit of NIL could actually be for a lot of these kids as long as it's approached the right way. It's not just about making money. It's not just a money grab. It really can be a valuable educational opportunity that prepares young people for their futures. And the language that's being proposed today allows these kids to do that. Our goal as parents, personally, your goal as school administrators, I hope, is to help kids' development and growth in every way possible. By not allowing student athletes to go out and use the talents God gifted to them to be successful outside of their sport is simply unfair. So I want to take a moment now to talk about fairness and equity when it comes to all students who attend your schools. Students who are talented in other areas like art and music, for example, they can already monetize their talents without restriction. For example, if Jennifer is an amazing painter and decides to partner with a local business to provide art instruction to make money, no one can stop her from doing that. If Michael is an awesome drummer and plays in the high school band, nobody can stop Michael from being paid for a partnership with an instrument store and showing up on their social media posts talking about how much he loves a certain brand of drums or sticks. Or if a student in the robotics club teams up with a company to help them develop technology for their store or website, no one tells them they can't be in robotics club anymore. So why are athletes different? Why are the rules different for them? They shouldn't be. And that's exactly what the US Supreme Court ruled on June 21st, 2021, which is why the OHSAA is in the situation it currently is, facing a lawsuit. NIL being forced to be allowed with zero guardrails in place. That is the status of today for your state. So even if this particular lawsuit wasn't filed, let's just say it wasn't filed, one would eventually be filed. Or you would have lawmakers getting involved trying to write their own NIL rules for high schoolers, which they've already threatened to do. We all know that judges and lawmakers are not the most informed when it comes to high school sports and how schools function, yet they would be the ones writing the rules that you would have to abide by and then get no say in changing. That's the reality of the situation. If this vote fails again, like it did in 2022, you lose control. Technically, you've already lost control as of right now, temporarily maybe. But if you don't pass NIL yourselves in 2 weeks with these guardrails in place, you lose control of what NIL looks like for your schools and for your students. And I assume that you probably want to keep that control instead of giving it away to lawmakers or the judge who is overseeing the current case, right? We've spoken at length with Doug and the other OHSAA board members about their goals for getting NIL passed in the state. And there are three main goals that have come out of our conversations with them. The first is number one, to protect the schools. Number two, to protect the student athletes, those partaking in these opportunities. And third, protect undue influence. Okay? These are the goals. This is how that language was crafted, to protect these three things, to allow it, but to protect these three things that I know are so important to all of you. And, we've heard from several other athletic association executive directors and their experience in passing NIL in their state. And you can quickly read there on the screen. We have heard from the Illinois High School Association Executive Director Craig Anderson, basically saying that they have had no concerns from any of their member school administrators regarding the changes, and no additional work has been required of our staff since they first put that through. From New York, they were one of the first ones to push it through after the Supreme Court ruling. And they too says since implementing this change, we haven't encountered an issue or challenges related to high school NIL activities in New York. And Robert, who's the executive director in Pennsylvania, he said that his NIL policy at the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association, as adopted by the board of directors there, has served our member schools well, and we've encountered very few issues. So this just helps give you some just kind of real world perspective, okay? These people have been dealing with it for years now. It's been allowed for 4 years, at least at the college level, and obviously the trickle down effect has happened at the high school level as well. This is the state of their situation having this passed in their state. And as you can see, they're forthcoming and saying, look, it really hasn't changed much. There was a lot of hoopla to begin with, but it really hasn't changed much for us. So as we talk about this, and I know a lot of you, of course, understand the real repercussions that can come of not passing this again when the vote takes place in a couple of weeks from now, right? You're already in the middle of it. The temporary restraining order has already been filed by the judge. There are no guardrails, okay? But we're here today, and our partnership with the OHSAA exists because we truly believe that passing this for student athletes is the right thing to do, but also given the potential alternatives, if it's not passed by you, it's the smart thing to do. We talked about a lot today. I covered a lot here today. In order to simplify everything for you, I'll leave you with this before we take some questions. There are three things as administrators at your school that you will need to do if NIL passes 2 weeks from now. The first, educate yourself on the new rules. We can help with that if you need it. You already need to know the amateur rules. This would just be another thing, and we already went through all the education of that. The second thing, communicate and provide resources to your families on the rules. You should be doing this for all the other rules that exist anyways. This is just part of the puzzle now. And lastly, report violations when you're made aware of them. Again, deals aren't being disclosed to you. That's not how the rules are written. They're being disclosed to OHSAA. But if you are made of aware of some sort of violation, you get that phone call, you get that email, you simply send it up the pipeline. Okay? Now, if NIL does not pass, let's talk about the three concerns that exist if it doesn't pass. The first is that you'd be robbing student athletes of opportunities and professional development that will help set them up for future success long after their playing days are done. The second, the judge will force OHSAA to allow NIL, and you get no say in the language. I know you don't want that. And lastly, that will likely lead to undue influence and recruiting concerns based on NIL language that's written by people who aren't really well versed in what needs protecting when it comes to high school athletics. I understand that change is hard. These rules have existed for a long time the way that they are. And I know that you likely have some questions about this, and will have even more as NIL sits on your doorstep. I want you to know that we are here to help. We've created a couple of PDF resources for you that will be emailed out this week so that you have things that are tangible to use as kind of quick hitting guides for you when it comes to what this proposed language actually means. But also as part of our agreement with the OHSAA, we're offering, not requiring, but offering all member schools and/or entire conferences, if you'd rather do it that way, a 25% discount on our institutional partnership offer. This partnership will provide your school with a lot of things, and we already have partnerships with more than 50 schools across the country. The first is that we provide educational NIL workshops for your student athletes and their families, as well as access to live NIL coaching courses by me online every month during the school year. This takes care of that education piece for you, takes it off your plate. We provide the NIL education and the resources that your student athletes and their families will need and come to expect from you, as this is now part of their world. But we also provide all the necessary email communication for you to send out to the family so that you don't have to worry about crafting that. Again, our goal is to help alleviate any administrative burden that you may have. Preseason parent packets, NIL resources to populate your website tab, best practices for athletic directors, more and more. And lastly, your lead administrators will also have direct access to us for any NIL related questions that come your way from athletes, parents, coaches, business owners, whoever. This is really fast changing, this whole landscape, and it is hard to stay on top of all of this. We are the experts in this space, and you can rely on us to get you the information you need to provide the answers when questions are asked of you. And if we are unsure, we will go directly to OHSAA for you to get the answers that you need. We believe this partnership can significantly enhance your school's NIL strategy and provide you also with a valuable marketing opportunity without you having to do any of the heavy lifting. There are things that will be required of you in this new landscape, but we're here and we're able to take most of that burden so that you can focus on all the other responsibilities that you have. So again, completely optional, but just so you know, this is available to you if you want it. Now, before I wrap up today, I do want to make mention that OHSAA is making compliance staff members available for you all day on Friday, November 14th. So in case you have some last minute questions ahead of the vote, just keep that in mind that there'll be compliance staff members ready to take your call and answer your questions. They're also going to be available to you the entire week of November 17th when the voting is happening to answer anything that might pop into your mind at that point. So make sure you please reach out to them directly. And with that, I'll throw out my email address as well as Joe's email address on here right now so that if you have any questions that you want directly to us, perfectly fine, feel free to reach out. But I know that I'm sure we've had some questions that have come through. I'm also going to be bringing in Kristin into the conversation. She's with, of course, OHSAA to help answer any additional questions that you guys may have. So feel free to throw whatever you have into the chat. If we haven't answered them already, we'll try to get to them live right here.
Stephanie, thank you so much for your presentation today. So we do have quite a bit of questions that came in, which has been fantastic. We've answered a couple of them here and there. But what we're going to do here is we're going to get into the language and some of the interpretations that we have. And I'm going to have Kristin answer those questions. And then we do have a few example questions that I'll probably throw your way, Stephanie, kind of moving forward from there. So let me get Kristin on the screen here, just with the PowerPoint presentation next to it as well. So Kristin, first thing I want you to address, if you don't mind, how was this language developed? I think, we went through a lot of the information today. And can you talk about the process from really the time that we had failed it originally to where we are now and how this was put together?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ron. Good morning, everyone. This has been an ongoing conversation ever since the vote failed the first time. Back last fall, so not this current fall, but about a year ago, we went around in our regional meetings, did include information on NIL, received feedback, but then after those meetings, we did pull together a group of about 20 or so principals, athletic directors, legal counsel from around the state, and we used those individuals to provide feedback for us on what is some of the language that you want to see included. And so took that feedback from Ohio school administrators and then looked at other states' language as well to make sure that we were consistent with what was available across the country while also reflecting the desires of the member school administrators. So the schools definitely had a say in what you see in front of us today.
Great, thank you, Kristin. So we got a lot of questions about how schools are involved and what their processes are. A lot of questions on, we want to make sure that our student athletes have the appropriate information. So how can we be involved in that process? And then can you also talk about the 14-day reporting period and what those issues might be, and if there are penalties that would come along with that?
So first I'll address the 14-day requirement for students. Again, clarification, it is students who are reporting that to our office. We have developed a form that's ready to go, and it would be the student and or their families who would send that email to our office. And once that notification takes place, we would then inform you as the schools so that you're not flying blind as to whether or not a student athlete might have some eligibility concerns moving forward. So that is definitely something that we want to make sure that you are aware of, but doesn't place that added obligation to send that, for the school to send that to our office. And then it looks like we might be receiving a little bit of feedback. I do want to make sure that you all can hear us okay. So give us just one quick second. All right, so I think we might have that fixed. So thank you for your patience there. Ronald, do you mind prompting some additional questions that came in that we might be able to address?
Yeah, let me scroll here briefly. Can you talk about student athletes that has a deal with a part or an apparel partner? And are they allowed to wear those in game, or are they not allowed to have those at all whenever they're actually participating in the contests?
Yeah, so we do expect a very minimal amount of kind of those brand wear, Nike, Adidas, those sort of things. But when that report is made to our office, we would obviously be working with the school, notifying of them, seeing what sort of branding agreements that the school might have that would supersede any student eligibility, NIL or branding agreement. So the language currently prohibits students from utilizing their marketing agreements during official team activities, which would include a game, but we would obviously use our due diligence to work with the school to see if there would be any conflicts with what the school may already have in place in terms of the apparel that their whole team wears, not just that individual student athlete. And one of the things I will say, this is kind of unrelated, but I saw one of those questions come in earlier relating to the school's obligation. With this language does not prohibit you as a school administrator from helping, to educate your student on what these regulations are and entering into, agreements with Stephanie and Joe at Influential Athlete or any company that you deem appropriate for your local area to help educate those students. So it's the bridge between those schools and those companies that is prohibited, that you can't help facilitate those agreements, although the education is certainly your prerogative. We've had an example in the past where a student who had completed his high school athletic career was given a collegiate NIL deal for $75,000 and wanted to go buy a car. And the school was able to work with that student, help explain there's going to be insurance, there are other ramifications, and really help student. And we realized that you as the administrators at the schools might want to help those students do that. So there is no prohibition on that. The prohibition is on facilitating those agreements with other brands in your area.
Great. Thank you, Kristin. Can you talk about 411.5? That discusses the rebuttable presumption and how that will really be handled by our office, what schools' obligations are, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So when a student or a family reports any NIL deal to our office, we are also going to inquire as to the first date of enrollment for that student in the school. I saw some of the comments of innocent until proven guilty. This isn't actually the only place in our bylaws where such a concept exists. So under the recruiting bylaw, there is a language that if a student follows a coach to a new school, they are presumed to be recruited there unless they can refute that. The best example I can give is a student submits enrollment paperwork in February and the coach is not hired until August. Even though they may have played for that coach previously, that timeline very clearly establishes that the student was not recruited to play for that coach because they were already enrolled in that school. So this the rebuttable presumption is not the first time that this will be in our bylaw language, but as Stephanie explained, it it reaches a fact of conclusion and then allows our office to work with the individual students to gather the relevant information to either refute that presumption of recruiting or presumption of influence into the enrollment of the school or not. So again, this is not the first place or the first time this language has been used, and it does allow our office the authority to spend time to reviewing those potential transfers that occur based on NIL deals.
Thanks, Kristin. For an individual who earns money through a compliance, personal branding rights deal, and they wanted to decide to purchase warm-up shoes or gear for their team, would they be permitted to do that, or does that fall in line with the language that directly involves a deal and benefiting people outside of the individual that is signing that deal?
Yeah, so the student athlete would not be able to work with that athletic department to provide those benefits to the student athletes on their teams. That would be in violation of the current regulations. However, that is different from if a school works with a local company and the local company decides they want to, provide shoes or warm-up gear or something to the school. There's nothing within this language which would prohibit your continued involvement and partnership with your local businesses. It is the student athlete who is entering into these NIL agreements that cannot provide inducements, favors, those sort of benefits to their teammates. It is specific to benefits related to the student athlete involved in the marketing and branding.
And can you talk about when a student makes a post, which is typically what's going to happen? There are going to be social media agreements that you have to post about a specific brand that these students are involved with. If their profile picture or their header has their school name or logo in it, would that be a violation, or are we looking at just the post itself?
Sure. So what we would have to do is to look at that student's total profile, because if they are branding themselves based on a company and the agreement they have on that company, that needs to be a standalone agreement and entity and platform that student would need to utilize. The post itself clearly would not be able to merge or use the school's branding gear. But if a student doesn't make that distinction as to this is my NIL page and this is my personal page, we would have to review that and determine what would be the appropriate penalties, if any, under bylaw 11. And I saw some of the questions of what are the penalties. There is a broad range depending on the severity or the blatantness of the violation. If a student clearly makes a commercial with the school's logo on it, there could be pretty significant ramifications to the student athlete themselves, because part of the reporting to our office will require them to sign off understanding these 9 criteria which are outlined here. You have to follow those in order to be compliant. So the penalties would be associated with the student athlete themselves. If there is discovery that very clear evidence that a school helped facilitate an illegal sort of an agreement, there could be ramifications to the school, but we would foresee the vast majority of any violation being some sort of suspension for the student, whether that be 1 game, 2 games, up to a full year of period in ineligibility. But we are optimistic that we would not be looking at anything like that.
So we've gotten a question or comment a couple of times that discusses how expansive this rule and regulation it has been written. Can you just talk a little bit more about why there are so many regulations in there, and what we heard when we were out on the road, and what the attempt was here whenever we were writing this with our board, with our colleagues out in the field, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the good thing I would say about being one of the later states, I don't think we said it in this presentation, but we did in our regional update meetings we conducted just over the past few months. We would have been the 9th state in the country at that point in time to implement it the first time the vote failed. Now we would be the 45th state to implement it. And that 2 or 3 year gap really allowed our office to take some of the best language from around the country, work with our school administrators in that NIL committee that we had and place it in front of you for consideration. So it is expansive, but we had the benefit of drawing from the best language from all over the country and didn't feel the need to exclude something just because potentially some of the lengthiness of those requirements, really trying to keep the focus of education-based athletics on the forefront and add in as much language that we could to make that possible.
Thanks, Kristin. Stephanie, I'm going to throw a question to you real fast, give Kristin's talking voice a break. I know you just had yours. Can you talk a little bit about, how students and families would either approach influential athlete or approach another group or company to engage these services and these education services really that you and your colleagues would provide?
Yeah, so sure. So, just to be very clear, because we get this question all the time, and I'm happy to answer it. We're not an agency. Okay, so we're not finding deals for kids, negotiating contracts, and taking a big commission off them. That's not what we do. We could have started that type of company, but we chose not to. You need different sort of licensing models for that. We are strictly an education company. And so what I mean by that is we work in twofold. We work directly with individual athletes. We have dozens of athletes across the country, high school D1, D2, and D3 athletes, all successful in the NIL space because we teach them what to do and how to do it in order to be successful. Personal branding, how to pitch themselves, how to use social media like a business tool, things along those lines, how to be good on camera, all of those soft skills that are necessary in order for a business to see you as somebody who's marketable, because NIL at the end of the day is simply just marketing utilizing student athletes. When it comes to our other side of our business, working directly with institutions, we've partnered with more than 50 high schools, just to give you an example there, across the country. And what we do for them is, again, we alleviate that administrative burden of having to educate on the new rules. We know this is new for you guys. We know that obviously you're going to learn the rules and everything like that, but we help to provide that education in very high quality ways with both workshops. We have monthly master classes where we cover all different kind of subject matters under the NIL umbrella, keeping compliancy at the forefront. And we also offer all of the resources that you might need as administrators to farm out to your school families. These could be preseason parent packets. I'm sure a lot of you have preseason meetings where parents come and either you provide them digitally or you actually give them a handheld packet. Paper, I know it's like one of these things that we never see these days. We also help you understand how to best situate kind of your school's website when it comes to creating an NIL hub of information that you can direct parents, athletes, coaches, business owners to, so that you don't have to answer all the questions. Oh, we have all that information that you need under this tab. We help you populate that tab with a lot of different resources, do's and don'ts, how business owners can get involved with student athletes, but do so according to the rules so that they don't get student athletes in trouble, things like that. So we really cover all the bases when it comes to educating your school community. And again, we do it in a variety of ways. So I've already had several emails come in from different administrators across Ohio asking for our pricing and things like that, because you can either partner with us as an individual school, which some schools like that. They want that personal, touch. They want that very, personal workshops and courses just for their student athletes, or you can partner with us as a conference, which obviously brings the price point down lower for you guys because you're doing it as more as a kind of together as a conference. So I will be sending, after this meeting, I will be sending out a pricing sheet just so that you have those details for you and what's included in those to your email, so you can keep a heads up for that.
Chris, I'm going to throw a couple more your way that continue to roll in. One, very, very short, very quick. Are students permitted to utilize their school email to conduct NIL business?
Sure. So the language of this talks about the use of self-publicity and promotion. It would be our recommendation to not allow a student athlete to use their school email address. But if that would not necessarily be a violation of these regulations unless they would put their school email address on the commercial that they're creating. That would be more internal back use, but certainly it would be your prerogative to add this to the list of prohibited contacts that a student may use their school email for.
And as students procure these deals, what's the process for a family and for a student to provide that information to our office? And then what is our office going to do with it after we get to that point?
Yes, thank you. So I touched on this briefly a little bit ago, but just to make sure that everyone is abundantly clear, the OHSAA will be developing resources for schools to use. It'll have its own standalone personal branding rights resource center. So you would have access to the education and whatnot of what a student needs to do if they are considering entering into one of these agreements. We have created a standalone email address and a landing page currently in a Google Sheets that we would expect that to potentially move into a different platform as these things continue to evolve. But the student would enter in their information, who the agreement is with, but then they would also have to sign a personal affirmation, again, going through all of these 9 issues saying, I understand this and my agreement is compliant with all of these different affirmations. So that would be uploaded to that platform, sent a notification to our office, and upon receipt, we would then forward that to the school to make sure you all were aware. Again, some athletic directors and principals, superintendents may want to take a little more active role in helping their student athletes, depending on the level of the agreement. But that would be up to you as to how you would want to handle that student moving forward, outside of making sure they are not promoting their product during educational official team activities.
Thanks, Kristin. And with a lot of these are probably going to be local companies. So what guidance would we give to schools when they have their mom and pop shop, show up in the AD's office, show up in the principal's office, superintendent's office, what have you, and say, hey, how do we do NIL deals? What is that conversation supposed to be like between the school and the business?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Whoever asked it, thank you very much. So because the school cannot help procure those agreements between those businesses and the student athletes themselves, thanks support for your interest in our high school athletic program. I'm able to assist you, and if you want to support our whole entire athletic program or any specific team, unfortunately our rules do not allow me to facilitate those agreements between yourself and the individual student athlete. So similar to how if a parent contacts a coach of, hey, I want to transfer to your school and play for you, the coach's response is, really glad that you're interested in our program and our school. Please contact our admissions office or our principal to get information relative to enrollment, and then I will be able to talk to you about our program and the way that we do things. But that conversation between local businesses and a school athletic director or a principal on how do I facilitate an NIL deal is not a conversation that should be taking place, and you would guide them to, you can help us with our athletic programs, but unfortunately I can't arrange NIL deals for you on your behalf.
Great. Thanks, Kristin. One other one. So we're obviously proposing this language. If it were to be voted into place, what would it look like if somebody were to bring suit against the OHSAA? Is that still going to be permitted, even though these are newly voted in, or are these things that are going to be continually changing as we find our way in this NIL landscape?
Yeah, so every year, as you know, we go through that referendum process in the spring between May 1st and May 15th to look to alter and modify our rules based on appeals panel feedback from our member schools, as well as the attempt to try and mitigate against legislative intervention, those sort of things. So I would view this bylaw just along with all other student eligibility issues as the language proposed to you and today is our first best stab at creating regulations which we believe our membership would be in support of. But it is going to be an ongoing, continuing conversation to look to tweak these rules, pull together additional committees, what's working, what's not working, and look to change those into the future. And then if a student athlete were to sue us, even with these rules implemented, just like we do with any other transfer case, age case, semester bylaw case, we will defend the rules in a court of law to the best of our ability, and we're very confident with our legal counsel and their ability to do that. So we are committed to fighting for and standing up for the rules, which the majority of the membership ultimately will have the final decision on.
And so going back to probably an interpretation question, would students be able to set up their own merchandise store? So they want to create their own product. They want to create their own brand. Would they, under these rules, would they be permitted to do that?
Yes, they would be allowed to, because they're using their notoriety and promoting themselves in that sort of capacity. It is a little bit different because they are not entering into an agreement with another company, but they are utilizing this bylaw to take advantage of those opportunities afforded to them. So that would have to be reported to our office. The details of the agreement would just be between the student and, what they're selling the merchandise for, those sort of things. But they would be allowed to set up personal merchandise shops under this current bylaw, and it not be a violation as long as they would report that to our office.
And with these deals, or even with a situation like that, is there any cap on what a student could receive, or any guidelines around what these deals would entail, assuming they're compliant with the remainder of the language there?
Yeah, that last part is really the key there, assuming they are compliant with no school logos, no taking place during activities. There currently is no cap within the current language. We have spoken with our legal counsel, and we do feel if there was a cap placed on this, that would just cause room for potential more litigation moving forward. So at this point in time, there is no cap, but really the cap naturally is set based on the student's notoriety and the ROI that a company may be able to get from that student. So if a company wants to pay a student, $5,000 to help with a commercial, if that commercial flops, then that's on the business and whatnot. But there are currently no regulations related to the amount that a student is able to earn, whether that be money, merchandise, or services of value.
Great, thank you, Kristin. I think I have one more. Make sure we hit on before we get moving. Can you talk a little bit about how we're going to work with our allied organizations? So OSBA, BASA, OHSAA, and the guidance that we're going to help them with, and what's going to go on our website, and what this is going to look like should it be passed.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Doug has made a commitment in working with these professional organizations on a very close-knit capacity, and he is already working with BASA right now, and they're out doing their regional meetings, just sharing this one-sheeter that we've created. We have an expectation to continue to work with OHSAA and the Principals Association to request, information be shared amongst your platforms, the AMP system for OHSAA and whatnot. And I know next week, Ronald and I will both be at OHSAA talking about an unrelated issue that we're considering for a referendum, but certainly we'll make ourselves available for NIL questions at the end of that sort of presentation. So definitely we'll look to work with those organizations and use their leadership to provide us with feedback that we can consider to potentially tweak these regulations should they pass moving forward.
Perfect. So before I turn it over to Kristin and Stephanie for parting thoughts, I will just make a brief note. This presentation was recorded. We will be posting this to our website towards the middle or end of next week. Once our second session takes place, we do want to make sure that people do come to that and ask those questions that they have, especially if they weren't asked here today. So again, that will be posted a little bit later next week, and we'll send that out to the membership once it's on the website. But Kristin, I'll start with you. Any parting thoughts, any questions that came to your mind that we didn't touch on? And then from there, I'll have Stephanie provide some parting thoughts as well.
Yeah, the biggest, takeaway I would say is our office is committed to the creation of these regulations to allow our schools to be placed in the best opportunity to enforce them moving forward, to allow our office to enforce them moving forward, and to allow your students those opportunities to engage in some of these life lessons that they're going to be used, later in life. And we are committed to working with our schools and receiving feedback on them for continual updates and improvements for education moving forward. So we're really pleased to have partnered with Stephanie and her group. I think they're a great resource for our schools moving forward, but it is in your own local district and school's discretion as to what, if any, sort of education you all want to utilize and the extent that you may want to. So it really gives you great flexibility in deciding how to move forward in that capacity. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time today, everyone.
And then Stephanie, anything from your end that you wanted to touch on before we go?
Yeah, sure. No, I just appreciate everyone being here and, just being open to this. Again, I know change is hard. I get it. And what I will say to you, especially with our experience of working with Wisconsin through this almost exact same situation, is that when the membership, just like any of the other rules, when the membership votes new bylaws through, you have the control to tweak them in the future. When something is pushed through by a judge or a lawmaker, bets are off. You have no control. So even if these are put into place and the 9 criteria are put into place and you as a membership feel as though, well, this could use a little tweaking or this is not exactly right, you have the ability to come to the table and to make those changes. That's the beauty of this. And that's why that control is so important, which is why, pushing this thing through will benefit you in the long run, because it's going to get pushed through whether you like it or not. It's a matter of whether or not you maintain that control as member schools in Ohio, or you don't, and you leave it up to the other guys. So that would be my one just kind of caveat there, is that we've seen this happen, and it's already happening in Wisconsin where they might be making some tweaks to some things, and that's fine, right? You don't know what the reality of the situation is until it's the reality. And so you just want to maintain that control so you have that ability in the future. Joe and I will also be going to OIAA next week. So if you guys are around on Monday, we're going to be there. We'll be situated next to the OHSAA table. If you would like to ask any questions of us or just have a conversation, we'd be happy to have that. We welcome that, of course. Gotten a lot of emails from many of the athletic directors and other administrators asking about pricing for our partnerships. Again, we do it with individual schools as well as entire conferences. Shoot me an email. Let's have a conversation. Stephanie@influentialathlete.com, or Joe, makes it easier, at influentialathlete.com. And, we can get that information over to you. We're also going to be providing those 2 other PDF resources, just those quick hitter guides as to what these policies mean for you and your schools and your school families. But no, I appreciate you guys being here and listening, especially on election day. I know it's a busy day for some of your schools, being polling places. So thanks for being here, and hopefully we get a chance to meet in the future.